everyone, it's Linda from LyndaCreates, and I have a fun project for Mother's Day basically. It is going to be a needlebook, and it's going to be the first needlebook I make. I'm also going to be doing a Stitch Your Stamp project on it. So it's a combination of stamping, stitching, thrifting, sewing, a little bit of everything. But the one thing I do know is that I definitely need a needlebook. I have been storing my needles in this little Japanese box, and I have these vintage sewing needles, which has been working out really great. I know where they are at all times, but it would be nice to have a pretty needlebook, and I thought, what better time than Mother's Day to do this project? Let me start with the layout of the needlebook first, and then I'll go on to the stamping of the Stitch Your Stamp part. There's also going to be die cutting in here. So let me lay it out first, and then I will show you what I'm going to do. So one of the main things I was thinking about with the needlebook is that I don't necessarily need a lot of pockets, and I'm not going to carry a whole bunch of things around with me. This is more for at my studio desk where I can just flip it open and find the right size needles. So that's going to be the priority of my needlebook. Nothing too fancy. The other thing too is the size. Folded size is 4¼ inches wide by 6¼ inches high. This is all thrifted fabric, so I'm really excited about that. Let me show you the back side. So I have in there a piece of cream colored sheet. So that is the main piece that I cut out. And then I ripped out several pieces of similar colors. I wanted this dark aqua color. I had recently thrifted this fabric, and although it was pretty, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do with it. So I decided that's part of my challenge. This is not the usual colors I would work with. This dark aqua. I love the flowers, but the dark aqua and then this gold color was a little different for me. But it works so perfectly. And this was also a cotton fabric that was in the stash that I thrifted. So that's the outside. The inside's pretty plain. It's again a full sheet of this aqua color, and I thought I'd cut a snippet of that. I did a little piece of the gold. The thinking is it's going to be a little pocket. The other thing that I use or like to keep handy all the time are needle threaders, so I wanted to make a little pocket that can hold it. These are the very cheap flimsy ones that don't last very long, so you get something like 50 to 100 at a time. So I want to always keep a few in a pocket up here. I'm going to change up what this side looks like because it's a little plain looking. This was another piece of fabric. I may do something like that, but I have something else I want to share that goes on that. Okay, so then I also have this doily that I recently thrifted, and what I wanted to do is make a pocket. Because it's hand crocheted, I believe it's going to be hard to cut it because it can unravel. So I'm going to fold it up a little bit, and then I'm going to flip it over so that the center of it will line up with the center of the pages. Okay, so when you come to this page, I'll have this side stitched down. You'll have a pocket on that side and a pocket on this side that you could put things. Okay, and then I will embellish all that, but the main thing I wanted to do is, of course, the felt to hold the needles. And I had this oddly shaped but correct color that I wanted piece of felt, so I'm going to trim this down, but this will be in the center of the book, and this will be the actual piece that holds the needles. So I have a lot of other little pieces that I'll show you as I go. So one of the things I wanted to make were yo-yos or Suffolk puffs that work in these colors. So I have a circle die that is 3 1/4 inches diameter, and so I cut 3 pieces of the cotton fabric similar color to what I'm using with this dark teal color. So I'm going to die cut circles to make Suffolk puffs, and just show you how easy it is. And what I'm going to end up with mathematically, the Suffolk puffs ends up about half the size of the circle that you die cut. So if you did a 3-inch circle, you'll get approximately a 1.5-inch Suffolk puff. Okay, so you cut a perfect little circle. Okay. So I'm just using sewing thread and a little sewing needle to make the yo-yo. I'm going to call it both. I think, again, here in the US, we know them as yo-yos, but I love the term Suffolk puffs, even though I have trouble saying it. So I'm just doing a running stitch. I'm not pulling it really tight, but because I have this turned in edge on this piece, that's where a little bit of the size of the finished circle is going to be taken up. So I'm done doing a running stitch around the sides, and now you just gently pull it to gather it. Now I'm just going to stitch it closed. So there's my first yo-yo. I'm going to do the same thing with the other two. And this is just going to be something to embellish on my needlebook. So I have my stamp platform ready. I'm using the Creative Expressions stamp designed by Sam Poole, and it's called Flower Seed. So I'm going to be using the flower part and maybe the word flower seed, I'm not sure. But I'm going to stamp it onto the sticky Fabri-Solvi. It's printable, and I used this before on fabric, and it's so nice to work with. So it basically, you print on it, and then you, after you stitch it, you wash it away. Okay, so I have my sticky Fabri-Solvi on my stamp platform. I have my stamp up here, and I'm using the VersaCraft Real Black ink up the stamp. Okay, I decided I'm also going to stamp the words on this. So I'm just going to rotate it. And I'm going to stamp the word flower seed. Just going to use it as a little, just a little snippet. So And I have this last piece of the gold. I have this, which is nice doily. I'm going to snip off. I hate cutting these because they are all connected. Okay. So I have one of these. It's going to have to go. I'll keep it together with my Suffolk puffs because it'll be a nice little added part on the inside. But this was a challenge to me to use bold colors that aren't my normal palette. This gold especially was really off the wall for me. So in keeping with that, what I want to do is, instead of plain white stitching on it, I'm going to use bold colors. So I'm going to use the gold, similar, I guess this is more of a mustard color. I'm going to try using the mustard color and use, I think because I'm going to have the flowers stitched on the front here, I'm going to keep it simple stitches. I mean, in a sense, this is like several pieces, so I could do it more like a crazy quilt kind of stitching, but instead I'm going to do some slow stitching, 3 strands of embroidery floss, and I'm going to try to do some nice straight running stitches. Because actually doing running stitches like this is truly the most relaxing of slow stitching. I think it's going to be totally different than what I normally do, mostly because of the color combination. I think this is going to be an extremely relaxing project because it's also going to combine embroidery. I still have the embroidery to do for the front cover, but taking the time to be so relaxed. Now, the other thing about my needlebook is that I'm also making it custom designed to fit only the things that I would need on a practical basis. So as I'm sitting here slow stitching or working on any projects, what are the pieces that I need, tools that I need? So I'm not adding like extra scissors or extra thread. I honestly see if I need a different thread color than what I have access to the containers, the boxes and bags that have all the thread. So I don't need to put it in a needlebook. So the reality is there isn't a lot of extras that I need in my needlebook. I literally just need a place to organize my needles safely, my scissor, my needle puller, everything else, needle threader, Again, if I need something like to cut fabric, a big scissor, I have that easily accessible. So instead of worrying about how I'm going to do the stitching on this, my main thing is to get this piece stitched down first. That is something I just absolutely love about working with fabric, with textiles. There is just so much you can do. So I'm going to have the Stitcher stamp flowers here, and I'm going to do some stitching on this, so there'll be a lot more embellishments, and this is just adding the background. So I've stitched down the edges that I could. The only one that I haven't done yet is this side, which is the front cover. So if you fold it in half, see, there's the cover. So what I did was, on the computer, I drew up an oval shape, and it's 2 7/8 inches wide by 4.5 inches high, and then I added a 1/4 inch seam allowance on it. And the size is to match my stamp with a little bit of overage, so it looks like it's coming out of the frame, basically. So that's what I plan to do. The seam allowance is so that I can tuck it in when I'm done. Let me cut this out and we'll take a look. So there's the shape. So something like that. So the flower will fit on top of that. So what I'm going to do is, with the seam allowance, I'm going to cut it out of this slightly off-white colored background. Now this is like a tea towel kind of fabric, more of a gauze than a solid tea towel. But so what I was thinking was, if you take the pattern, that's not too bad, but if you take the pattern, you fold it in half, and then you fold it in a quarter, then you really only need to cut this one curve to make it perfect. Let's see. Oh, not too bad, but definitely easier this way. Okay, so now you have the oval shape, and again, you're going to turn in a 1/4 inch. So here's what I'm planning to do. Now remember, as I stitch, I'm coming in a 1/4 inch all the way around, but I also have the word flower seed. I don't know, I could stitch it much lower and add flower seed at the top. I think I might do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, now that I have the outside part done, I'm going to cut the inside part. And the reason I'm doing that is so now I have the actual piece. I could use it like a template. So now, if I want, I can, again, because doing the stitching over this, what I can do once I have this shaped the way I want it, I can go iron it again so that I have a crisp edge that I'm stitching towards, and remove the paper. Okay, so there's what the final shape will look like, or close to it. I do plan to add, maybe I'll have it overlap lower so I can add flower seed up there, and then my flowers will go stamp on that. Okay, so right now what I'm doing is a whip stitch, which is a tiny little stitch to hold it or sew it down. And now I can cut out my Fabrisoli. Now what I want to do is cut kind of as close to the image as I can, because anything that you don't cut away is going to be the sticky part later on when you dissolve it. So you don't have to be absolutely perfect, but coming in a little closer never hurt. Okay. There's the main part of the image. Let me cut out the words too. And I will start doing the stitching. I have my colors here. I wanted to pull the color palette from this so it doesn't clash. So I'm going to start with the medium shade of pink, 3 strands, and start stitching my stamp. So I'm stitching away on my stamp on the cover, and I've done the medium pink and the dark pink, and I'm now coming in with the lightest pink. That is the highlight, basically, or where the lightest part of the flower would be. It's a drizzly morning out there today, so just finding something quiet to do. So I finished stitching the flowers, and I'm working on or looking at the center of the flowers of how I want to stitch that. And that one kind of inspired me into a kind of a weaving kind of idea. I'm using 3 strands, and I want to go at an angle. So I'm using the darker gold color. I'm going to park this thread over here, pull out another needle. Boy, I wish I had a needle book. So now I'm coming in with the lighter yellow or lighter gold. When I weave it, it should blend the colors better. I am on the top left corner is where I've ended my yellow. So I'm going to come up in the highest point there. So now I want to come down in a 90-degree angle. So I'm aiming for, okay. And I'm using the back side of my needle. This is a tiny little area, so okay, so I just want to show how the weaving is going. I have about 3 rows of the light yellow going through there, and now I still have my dark yellow floss still there, still attached. So now I'll come back in and weave with the darker yellow next. Just want to show how that little bit of weaving turned out in the middle of the flower. I'm going to add some little French knots to finish off the center of that. So I'm going to start on the green. Now here's something I realized, you know those tiny little flowers? These tiny little flowers that seemed odd on this plant? I realize if you look at this inspirational fabric, it has these tiny little flowers that are growing amidst the other plant too. So I'm going to do these tiny flowers in probably like a dusty aqua color to match that. And meanwhile, and actually I could do that right now if I wanted to, just to get them in place. Yeah, I think I'll do that. And then I'll get going on the leaves, which will be the next kind of bigger stitchy task. So I'm going to do, it's 3 strands, and I'm going to do 3 wraps. So that's going to be my first little flower cluster. Okay, so there's my little clusters of flowers. Okay, so I wanted to show how I'm going to do the corner where the lines turn. So I've been trying to do all horizontal except for this bar went vertical. So now I want the top of the F to be vertical as well. So I'm at this corner and my needle came up in the top left corner of the letter. And I'm going to try to do it like a 45-degree angle down. And fill in any gaps if it's missing anything, but to try to stay, to make that angle neat and tidy so that it actually turns. And ends up being vertical stitches. And I think when you're dealing with lettering like this, your eye wants to see something a little more perfect. I finished stitching everything on the front. Did a little bit on the flowers. And I finished the front, and I finished the words up there too. What I have to do now is soak it so that I could remove this Fabrisolve here and here. So let me go ahead and do that and dry it off, and I'll be back. So I washed off the Fabrisolve, and so you can see how the words look up there. And there's the flowers. So I wanted to share the next page of my needle book. What I had to do, okay, so this is the back of it, of the first page. Okay, so that's the back of it. So what I'm doing is the next piece that will go across here. And let me show you. It's just pinned down for now. But this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so I have a piece of fabric that I'm going to stitch. Do a little bit of stitching like I did on the front. Now, I've discovered a new tool. I haven't used it yet, but I'm pretty sure this will be a better needle threader. And it's by Janlin. So I'm going to make the pocket for that. This is a piece of doily that I had cut up. Since this is going to be my needle book, I'm customizing it to my tools that I have. So the things that I need all the time, I'm making pockets to fit that, or those items. Now the back part, what I wanted to share was this bag came from a store called Chico's. It was a clothing store. Love their stuff. But every time you bought jewelry, they'd put it in a little bag like this. And I had several of them. Didn't know what to do with them, but I kept them because some of them, I'm not sure, but some of them felt like silk. They feel like they're just scraps of fabric that they turn into little bags. So I had this bag. So it's just a drawstring bag, but what I wanted to do was the bag to hold my scissors inside. Now, what I needed to do, I have a piece of the scrap felt that I took, that I had from the inside, and I'm going to sew it on the inside at the bottom here, so that when the scissor goes in, it'll land on that instead of hitting the fabric bag. So I'm also going to add a little flower here. So I'm going to sew this felt on. The thing I'm doing is not taking the thread all the way, or the needle all the way through to the front, because it is such a thick lining in this little bag. So I'm just sewing it to the lining, and it really is to just hold it in place. And the whole purpose is so that the scissors points don't keep punching or poking at the fabric of the bag. Okay, I wanted to show that I sewed the felt onto the bottom of the bag on the inside. So I just stitched around the edge to give it some backing. And now I want to add the flower on the outside. So I'm turning it back right side out. The back side's going to have this pocket, but before I stitch the bag onto the fabric, I want to stitch the flower onto the bag, so that, again, I'm working all on the layers that I can. So now I'm just going to work on this side. I'm going to stitch down my pocket, add a little color to my flower. I'm going to start by stitching down the doily. I did a blanket stitch across the top of this pocket that I have, and now I'm going to continue this blanket stitch along the side, around all the way around. And I'm using 2 strands of embroidery floss. I decided to do a band across the center here, and it's going to be on both sides. So when I put this on, it's going to add a little bit of color behind there, which I really love. And then I added a few clusters of just little pieces of fabric to add a little more interest up here. And I'm currently working on stitching the flowers a little bit. I'll stitch a little bit on the leaves to hold that down. Now I need to do this side, which will be the scissor pocket. So I'm going to start by stitching this flower down on the bag. And what I may do is just wrap it around in back. I'm going to sew it on with just thread rather than floss. And I'm just going to go around, and the trick is that I'm going to try and not, well, obviously I have to stay just on the upper level of the bag and not go all the way through. So I'm just going to start stitching it down. And I think I'm just going to do like a little running stitch. Okay. So there's the flower. So now the bag is ready to be stitched down. One last chance to put a magnet if I want. No, I'm just going to do it this way. So the goal is to stitch 3 sides of the bag, actually 4 sides, because I have to do across the top behind it to hold it in place. I decided to do just with thread a blind stitch around the edges, and the reason for that is because the seam inside of the bag is so thick, and then you have the fabric, several layers of fabric, and then the background fabric. I think pushing the needle through everything to make a pretty stitch will be too hard. So I am just doing, show you. I'm just catching the back fabric and coming up through the back side edge of the bag itself, just so it holds in place, isn't visible, and is easy on my hands and very smooth. So just going around like that. I'm so glad I could use this bag that I've saved for all of these years. Okay, so I have the front and the back of the inside or of the cover stitched down. I have the 2 pieces pinned together, and I decided that I'm going to do a running stitch to hold the 2 pieces together. I'm working on the inside page that is this hanky, crocheted hanky, and I've already stitched down this flower and my yo-yos, my Suffolk puffs, onto the pocket side of it. So now I have the inside parts to do, and these have pieces of felt so that I can add more pieces to it, pins and needles. I was originally had the applique parts up near the top, and I was going to stitch it down here, but I discovered, or I realized, that if I stitch along here, it'll show up, the stitches will show up here, and I didn't want that. So I moved it all to the bottom. I stitched the, you can't really see it, but I stitched the white felt down at 2 rows of back stitching just to make sure it's secure. And then you could see a little bit of the green stitching that I did for the flowers. So that is all stitched down. Now all I need to do is secure the pockets. I finished this side, and the pocket is very secure. I stitched mostly along the fabric, a little bit along the lace, but there was fabric on the back. I'm starting on this side, and I pretty much have lace on both sides. So I'm coming down this seam. So luckily there's a very thick edge of crochet, and I'm going to follow that seam along and do a lot of stitching on it to hold it in place and secure it. I have everything ready to assemble now. I have the cover, And then I have the inside. This felt just attracts things. Okay, so I have the inside page. Now I think, just to make sure I get centered, let me do it that way. And it's going to stick out. That's how I planned it. Okay, there's that. And then I have my felt that is going to go right in the middle there. So I'm just sticking a pin in the center seam to just mark it. I wanted to share how to stitch in the pages down the center, but trying to keep everything straight and centered at the same time. So I was struggling with it a little bit, so I wanted to share how I worked it out. So I started with figuring out where the center was and sticking pins in. So kind of watching where the fold was and sticking a pin in and watching where it came out, kind of thing. And I did about 4 of them across here. And once I had that, I checked it. And then I was getting ready to stitch it down, and I thought, well, what if it's not right? I need to do a tacking strip to make sure. So once I had it in place, I did a little tacking strip down the center, and then I made sure it came out along the outer seam where it's supposed to. It's this white thread along here. So now that I have everything tacked down, I can find my thread. I'm using 6 strands of embroidery floss, and the main thing I want to do is make sure it's straight along the back seam. It can stay hidden right along this edge. And then I also have to make sure it goes straight down the center as well. So that's why I have the tacking stitches there. So I can go ahead and start. I have, just so these little guys don't get tangled up, I'm going to pin them. So I'm going to start at the top here, but hide the knot underneath the lace. Okay. So I know I want to stitch along this seam here. So I could keep it looking nice out here, but the trick is to make it look nice in here. So So as you go back and forth, you could kind of keep an eye on the stitch, what the stitches look like on the inside. And they're also showing up on the outside, but I chose a color that sort of blended in because I already have that yellow running stitch there. Okay, when you get to the bottom here, you want to hide your knot. I'm hiding it under the lace if I can. So that is my needle book, my first needle book, done. So this is not meant to travel, like I said. It's more meant to sit on my desk, so when I need a needle, I could just open it up and find the needles that I want. It also gives me a place to put my new needle threader and my older needle threader. This pocket, I'm thinking my needle puller for now. Here it's going to be like pins. I was thinking doing it more like this way. I don't know, I have a lot of needles and I may end up using it. Well, what I could do, I have technically really only 2 pages for needles because it goes through to the other side. So I could have them whatever style I want, however I want to organize it. This is also for pins, or it could be for needles, right there. Other side I have another pocket. I could put some floss in there. Nice place to keep that. This is my scissor pouch. Now, put that over here. Okay, so this is my vintage Japanese scissor from my mom. And if you ever wondered about the bell, my mom put that on. Between the orange yarn and the bell, she added those so that she could find her scissors quickly. The orange for the color, and then the bell, if she has a bag and she shakes it, she could hear the bell. So out of sentimental feelings about watching her sew so much, I kept the bell and the bright orange yarn on there. Anyway, so in this pocket, recycled pocket, I put a piece of felt, so when the scissor goes in, the tip will sit on the felt rather than hitting the bag. And then I have the back of the book, which is just some embroidery. So this thing will sit on my desktop here. I have my sewing box, actually. Let me show you that. Next to my desk, right here, I have my sewing box. And I made this a while back. It was a thrifted box, 2 compartments, and I covered it with cardstock. Okay. You could see all the edges there. But what I did, I took this side of it, stuffed it with polyfill, and then took some fabric and glued it in there so it's nice and thick and it holds up. So all my pins are supposed to go here. I don't like putting sewing needles because if they go in, they're not coming out. It's so thick. But I haven't had a chance to put these away yet. So that is that half. And then this half I keep, I keep the other supplies, like I have my pen, my, oh, there it is. These are my other needle threaders. So I keep that on the other side. And so when you see me grabbing pins just on the desk next to me, this is what I'm grabbing. I have it in a tray next to my desk. So what I will do, now that I have my needle book, is I will have the other half of that tray. I could just stick it in there and have something to pull out when I need it. So I hope you enjoyed that. My very first needle book. I designed it to take care of the needs that I have when I'm stitching. I have, because I usually stitch in my studio, I have most of the things nearby. I don't need to put them all in a book, a needle book, but I wanted to make one where everything's safe, especially the scissors, so it doesn't the sharp point isn't sticking out. And then I realized too, I keep my sewing needles in this little box. And this is old and it's starting to fall apart a little bit, little wooden box. So I kind of want to organize. I wanted to organize my needles. Just kind of a nice thing to have. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and leave me a comment. I want to hear from you. I hope it inspired you to have new ideas of what you can do and to make the fun of making a needle book that is specifically for you. Please visit my website, LyndaCreates.com. That's Linda with the Y. LyndaCreates.com for more inspiration and sort of a place to find all the projects that I've been working on. And you can see more of the Stitcher stamp. You can see more of the slow stitching. So thanks again, and I will see you in my next video.